My name's Evelyn Harper, but everybody at the diner just yells, "Evie, more coffee." If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is how a broke, disgraced, 70-year-old waitress walked straight back into the financial world she'd been shoved out of and set a trap for the men who thought they'd ruined her. But to explain why a man in a $10,000 suit showed up at a Greasy Spoon at 6 in the morning begging a waitress for financial salvation, I have to take you back. 2 years ago, I was Evelyn Harper, managing partner at Harper & Cole Strategic Advisory in Denver, Colorado. I had the corner office on the 37th floor, all glass and skyline, with the Rockies looking like they'd been painted there just for me. I managed portfolios north of $60 million. My calendar was booked 3 months out. My car was a silver Lexus I didn't actually like but drove anyway because my clients trusted people who drove silver Lexuses. My days were full of people who owned ski resorts, tech startups, private aviation companies, and old money ranch land. I knew which fund manager was divorcing his wife before his wife did. Wealth does that to people, it makes them loud and sloppy. And then my son tried to out-Wolf of Wall Street the actual wolves. His name is Joshua, but everyone calls him Josh. I used to call him my good boy, past tense, you'll notice. The federal raid happened on a Thursday morning in October. I remember the sound first. Heavy boots in the hallway and the receptionist's voice rising an octave on the phone. I was reviewing quarterly projections when the glass doors to Harper & Cole burst open and a wave of navy jackets swept an FBI emblazoned across their backs, like a punchline to a joke I hadn't realized I was the butt of. They spread out efficiently, all business. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a tighter bun than I ever managed in my life, stepped forward. "Evelyn Harper?" "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't even shake. I'd sat through market crashes. This couldn't be worse than 2008. Spoiler, it could. She handed me a thick stack of papers. "We have a warrant to seize all company records, physical and digital, including your personal office." Behind her, agents were already slapping seizure notices on everything that wasn't actively running away. Computers, filing cabinets, servers, my coffee mug. Even my diplomas got bright orange stickers, like they'd personally committed fraud. I felt like I'd fallen into someone else's life. "Fraud?" I remember croaking. "There must be some mistake. We're advisory only. We don't touch client assets directly." That's when I saw him, Josh, standing just outside my office door, white as paper, hands cuffed behind his back. I didn't recognize him at first. Not the way he was then. Eyes wild, hair a mess, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. There was a smear of ink along his wrist where I knew his tattoo of a compass was. He'd gotten it at 20, told me it would remind him of his true north. I guess his true north turned out to be other people's money. He wouldn't look at me. "Josh," I whispered. "What did you do?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head once. They led him away, and that was the last time I saw him outside a courtroom. What I learned over the next week felt like reading a horror story written in spreadsheets. My son, my only child, the boy I'd worked 2 jobs for to get through college, had been forging my electronic signature on transfer authorizations, moving client funds through shell accounts, chasing high leverage positions like a gambler in front of a slot machine that kept almost paying out. 8 months, 43 clients, $3.1 million gone. Some of it recovered, most of it vanished into the black hole of bad trades and worse judgment. I sat in my lawyer's office with a stack of evidence and stared at the neat lines of my own name, signed in ways I never signed it. Wrong angle on the H, flourish on the Y, sloppy, careless. "He's been using your login credentials too," my lawyer said quietly. "It looks like someone inside it helped him bypass two-factor authentication. We'll argue you were not involved, obviously, but I'm the mother who hired him. I finished for him. The managing partner whose son looted the client accounts. Evelyn, don't sugarcoat it, Tom. I can read." The investigation dragged on for months. The criminal case eventually cleared me legally anyway. Turns out being humiliated on every local news station doesn't vanish just because the judge says not guilty. The headlines didn't say innocent mother duped by son. They said, financial advisor's son runs fraud scheme out of mother's firm. My face, my name, my reputation stapled to every story. The license board took their sweet time. Eventually, they suspended my individual registration pending further review, then permitted reapplication in the future, which is regulatory speak for "you're toxic, darling." My clients? Some sent flowers. Most sent lawsuits. They were kind enough to name me personally as a defendant out of habit. By Christmas, I was 70 years old with a revoked reputation, no firm, and exactly $63 in my checking account. I sold the Lexus. I left the high-rise condo with the mountain view and moved into a faded little apartment next to a laundromat and a tattoo parlor in South Denver, where the soundtrack at night was sirens and arguments. That's where the help wanted sign found me. Rusty's roadside diner sat wedged between a tire shop and a payday loan place off an I-25 exit the tourists never used. It was the kind of building you'd drive past 100 times without seeing, unless your radiator blew and you needed somewhere to cry into cheap coffee. The neon sign flickered between Rusty's and Usty like it couldn't commit. Inside, the floor was sticky, the laminated menus were older than half the staff, and the coffee tasted like punishment. The booths had duct tape over the rips, and the jukebox only worked if you kicked it twice and swore at it. It was perfect. Ever Waitress before? That was Rusty, real name Russell. But no one with that beard and those tattoos is called Russell. He asked the question while drying a chipped mug with a rag that looked like it had already lived 3 lives. I've been serving people for 35 years, I said. Just wore nicer shoes while I did it. He snorted. Fair warning, sweetheart. These people tip worse than hedge fund boys. You'd be surprised, I muttered. He hired me on the spot, paid cash at the end of each shift. No background checks, no references. He barely glanced at my name on the W-4. If he recognized it from the headlines, he didn't show it. The first week nearly killed me. It's funny people assume high finance is stressful. Try carrying 3 plates, a coffee pot, and a side of hash browns while table 4 is screaming that their eggs are overdone and table 7 wants to speak to the manager because their toast is emotionally dry. At least portfolio managers say please when they're being condescending. The breakfast crowd at Rusty's treated waitresses like ambulatory caffeine dispensers with a side of free therapy. But I adapted. You can survive a market crash. You can survive a diner. My knees ached. My feet throbbed. The first night I went home, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my blistered heels and thought, you survived losing your son. You can survive this too. The tips paid for my insulin. The work kept my hands busy and my mind just distracted enough that I didn't run endless replays of Josh being led away in cuffs. 3 months in, Rusty slapped me on the shoulder one morning. Didn't think you'd last a week, Evie, he said. Now the regulars ask for you. That's either a miracle or a sign of the apocalypse. I took it as a compliment. He called it interpersonal skills. I called it my newfound ability to smile sweetly while fantasizing about dumping cold coffee in someone's lap. That's when he walked in. It was a Thursday in March, the kind of ugly spring day Denver does so well. Gray skies, slushy leftovers of old snow, wind that smelled vaguely like exhaust and regret. The breakfast rush had thinned out. Truckers nursing bottomless coffee, a couple of construction guys in neon vests, 2 college students sharing pancakes because that's what their budget allowed. That's when the door swung open and in strolled a man who clearly didn't belong anywhere near Rusty's. Perfect navy suit, tailored within an inch of its life. White shirt so crisp it probably came with a butler. Dark overcoat. Polished shoes that had never met a pothole. And a watch so understated and expensive it practically hummed. He looked around once, his expression saying, "How did I end up in this tax bracket?" Then he slid into booth 6, the one under the flickering light, like he owned the place. I grabbed a menu and headed over, plastering on my best, "I don't care who you are. You're getting the same coffee smile." "Morning," I said. "Welcome to Rusty's." "Coffee?" He didn't look up. "No dairy," he said. "Black. And if you have anything resembling steel-cut oats, I'll take that." "We have oatmeal," I said. "Comes out of a box. You can squint and pretend it's steel-cut." That got half a glance. Cold gray eyes, quick once over, then back to his phone. He was already on a call, on speaker. "Of course. I don't care what the bank says, Mark," he barked. "We are not backing off the Tucson development. If they want assurances, they can look at our collateral sheet." He spread a stack of papers across the table like he was at a board meeting instead of a diner that smelled like bacon grease and cheap syrup. I poured his coffee and stepped back, but my eyes didn't listen to my brain. I hadn't seen cash flow statements in months, not in the wild. And here they were, pro formas, debt schedules, acquisition proposals lying there like a temptation. There are habits you never lose. Ex-smokers still notice ashtrays. Ex-drinkers still spot bars. Ex-financial advisors still read anything with columns of numbers. I delivered plates to table 4, refilled mugs at the counter, but my gaze kept drifting back to booth 6. I saw leverage ratios that made my stomach tighten. Lines of short-term debt financing long-term assets. Projections that only worked if the market performed like a fairy tale. I'd seen that pattern before, usually right before someone's empire imploded. 20 minutes later, the volume of his voice had gone from annoying to intolerable. You could hear every detail of his negotiation from the bathrooms. Rusty caught my eye from behind the counter, gave me the look, handle it or I will, and my version involves yelling. I walked back to booth 6, coffee pot in hand. Sir, I said, keeping my tone polite but firm. I'm going to need you to take that call off speaker or outside. Some of the other customers are trying to digest in peace. He held up one finger at me without looking, the universal sign for you are furniture. Hold on, he snapped into the phone, then looked up at me finally like I'd interrupted brain surgery. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, how much this call is worth? More than my hourly wage, I said. Less than my patience. Outside, please. The diner went quiet in that way diners do when everyone smells blood. He smiled, but it wasn't nice. I'll have the oats and eggs, scrambled dry. And yes, I do understand what you're saying, he added, turning back to his phone. This call is worth more than she'll see in her entire life. If you've never heard 50 years of your experience dismissed in one sentence by a man whose tie costs more than your rent, I don't recommend it. A couple of truckers snickered. One of the college kids looked sympathetic. Rusty rolled his eyes but didn't move. He was waiting to see whether I'd swallow it. I looked down at the papers spread across his table again. Columns, ratios, lines of red that only someone like me would see as flashing alarms. I took a slow breath. Actually, I said, just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. I understand something else. He frowned. Excuse me? If those numbers are what I think they are, that call isn't worth nearly as much as you believe. You keep leveraging projects like that, you'll be bankrupt within a year. The silence that followed was almost tender. He ended the call without saying goodbye, a tiny act of violence. I'm sorry, he said, voice flat. Did I ask for financial advice from the waitress? There it was, the word, the one he thought would hurt me. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation climbing my throat. The same humiliation I'd lived through on news channels, in regulatory hearings, in lawyers' offices. But then I reminded myself, these numbers don't lie. People do. You didn't ask, I said, steady. But if you had, I'd suggest you stop financing long-term development with rolling short-term loans, stop hiding your debt in special-purpose entities, and stop counting on a miracle exit to save you from basic arithmetic. His eyes narrowed. Who the hell do you think you are? I smiled. It came easier than I expected. I think I'm the woman who can see from here that your Tucson project is over-leveraged, your cash flow is strained, and a single hiccup in the market will knock you on your very expensive backside. A couple of the regulars tried badly to hide their grins. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. I'll have my breakfast now, he said finally, voice clipped. And if I ever need advice on hash browns, I'll be sure to consult you. He shoved the papers into his briefcase with more force than necessary, splashing coffee onto the table. I wiped it up with the calm of a woman who'd spent a year wiping up messes she hadn't made. As I turned away, I added, almost casually, you should really get a full audit before your lenders do it for you. He didn't leave a tip. Men like that rarely do when a woman bruises their ego. But the next morning, at 6 a.m. sharp, he was the one outside the locked glass door, knocking like the building was on fire. I was rolling silverware into napkins when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks. Rusty hadn't even turned on the sign yet. I glanced at the clock. 5:58. Evie, we open in 30. Rusty called from the kitchen. Ignore it. Another knock. Louder. Curious. I walked to the front and peered out. Booth 6 man stood there in a different expensive suit, overcoat buttoned up against the cold, his perfect hair now slightly disheveled, eyes hooded with lack of sleep. In his hands he clutched a thick manila folder like it contained his soul. I unlocked the door. We're not open yet, I said. You'll have to wait for your emotionally dry eggs. He didn't smile. I need to talk to you, he said, about what you said yesterday. Well. I stepped aside and let him in. The diner felt different at that hour, quiet to bright, stripped of its usual clatter and chaos. Just me, Rusty clanking around in the back, and this very expensive problem standing in the middle of the tiled floor. Coffee? I asked. Yes, black, please, please. We were making progress already. He slid into his old booth without asking. Habit, arrogance, or maybe he needed the familiarity. I poured his coffee and nodded at the folder. That your bedtime story? That, he said, opening it with a shaky breath, is the last 12 months of Lockwood Holdings financials. Lockwood. The name pinged something at the back of my mind. Real estate mostly. Some tech investments. They'd been in the business pages often enough. And you are? I asked. He blinked. Right. We'd skipped introductions in favor of insults. Graham Lockwood, he said, CEO. I sat down across from him like I belonged there. Old habits. What changed between this call is worth more than your life and please review my entire empire? I asked mildly. He rubbed a hand over his face. I spent all night going through the books, he said. Your comments yesterday. I couldn't get them out of my head. I called my CFO, my controller, even the external auditors. Told them to pull everything. I went through summary reports until 3 a.m. And you were right, he said, like the words tasted bad. More right than my entire financial team. They tell me we've got maybe 6 months of runway if nothing goes wrong. 4 if the Tucson deal stalls. 6 months was optimistic, from what I'd glimpsed. You're overextended, I said, flipping the folder toward me. Why? He hesitated. Growth, he said finally. Opportunity. We had access to cheap money and solid assets. It made sense. Did it though? He bristled. I wasn't reckless. No, I agreed. You were seduced. He blinked. By what? Leverage. The illusion that you can keep stacking debt forever as long as you juggle fast enough. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I started leafing through the pages. Balance sheets, debt covenants, project plans. It felt like slipping on an old coat, familiar, a little dangerous, and comfortable in places I'd forgotten I had. You have good businesses buried in here, I said after a few minutes. The commercial rental units in Albuquerque, the logistics warehouse outside Boise, a couple of small tech investments that are actually profitable. You saw that already? In the 3 seconds you let me glimpse your paperwork yesterday? Enough to know you're not an idiot, just arrogant. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. My board would agree with you, he said. On the second part, at least. I sipped my coffee. I'm a waitress, I reminded him. Why are you here? He exhaled slowly, like he was pushing out his pride with the air. Because apparently, he said, the waitress saw in 20 minutes what my entire financial department missed for a year. I need someone who isn't invested in my ego to tell me if there's a way out. I studied him. Not the $5,000 suit or the tired eyes, but the tightness in his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped against the coffee mug like he was hanging on by a thread. I'm not cheap, I said. I own 3 downtown buildings, he replied. I can afford you. You don't know what I cost yet. That got me a real, if brief, smile. Name it, he said. You're doing this wrong, I said. You don't even know who I am. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Looked at me a little closer this time. There's something familiar about your name, he admitted. Harper. Harper and something? Harper and Cole Strategic Advisory, I supplied. We dissolved 2 years ago after my son decided to experiment with fraud and the FBI decided to object. Maybe you saw the news. Recognition flickered across his face. He covered it badly. You're that Harper, he said. I am, I said. The disgraced one. The woman whose son turned her firm into his personal casino. He stared at me. But you were cleared. Legally, yes, I said. Professionally, not so much. Clients don't like the words embezzlement and family in the same sentence. He nodded slowly. That explains why I'm serving coffee in a roadside diner instead of yelling at junior associates in a glass tower, I offered. Yes, this is my exile. He took a breath, straightened his shoulders. Then I'm asking you, Evelyn Harper, disgraced or not, to help me, he said. Because frankly, I'm less afraid of what people will say about hiring you than I am of losing everything I've built since I was 25. I felt something then, under the weariness and the anger and the disappointment. Not hope, relevance. The feeling of having a brain people needed, not just hands that could carry plates. Here's what this would look like, I said, if I say yes. Once upon a time, I would have had an assistant in a pencil skirt and a Bluetooth headset draw up a sleek consulting agreement. Now I had a ballpoint pen, a napkin, and 60 minutes before the regulars started demanding eggs. First, I said, We do this legally. I still have an active LC Harper strategic. I kept it alive out of stubbornness and denial. If we work together, we do it through that. No under the table nonsense. I've had enough of that for one lifetime. You still have your licenses? He asked. Some of them. Enough. The board suspended my registration temporarily after Josh's case, but my Series 65 is intact, and I can function as a consultant, not a broker. I know where the lines are. He nodded. Second, I get full access. Every loan agreement, every project plan, every covenant, every side letter. If there's something you're too embarrassed to show me, that's exactly the thing I need to see. Done. Third, I get authority to recommend. You don't have to obey like I'm your financial mother, but if I say something is on fire, you at least look for smoke. That's why I'm here, he said. I'll listen. Listening and obeying are different sports, Mr. Lockwood. Graham, he said. If you're about to insult my judgment for money, you can at least use my first name. I smiled. Fourth, my rate. I wrote a number on the napkin, slid it across the table. He raised his brows. That's more than my outside counsel. Your lawyers argue about the size of your coffin, I said. I'm trying to keep you alive. Also, that's my old rate. Pre-scandal, pre-waitress. I may be a bargain now, but I have my pride. He looked at the number again. Fine, he said. You're worth it if you can do what you say. Plus, I added, equity. If I pull you back from the brink, if Lockwood Holdings survives because of the plan I build, I get a piece. Small, but real. I'm too old to work for just applause. He sat back calculating. Men like Graham are always doing math just usually in their own favor. That's unusual, he said. So is hiring a waitress to rescue your company, I replied. He considered it another moment, then nodded. Agreed, he said. On one condition. There it is, I said. Go on. We present this to my board as bringing an independent strategic advisory, not the scandal lady from the news. I'll say I retained Harper Strategic because of your track record before the situation. You're embarrassed to admit you found your consultant at Rusty's roadside diner, I translated. I'm embarrassed to admit I missed the warning signs you picked up between refilling coffee, he said bluntly. My directors are already nervous. They don't need more reasons to panic. Fair enough. Corporations can survive a lot but not the perception that the captain is flailing. When do you want to start? I asked. He pulled out his phone. How does now sound? He said. He dialed. James, it's Graham. I want a complete financial package prepared for a new consultant, Harper Strategic. Full tenure sheets, project breakdowns, debt schedules, covenant summaries, stress test models, everything. Yes, everything. No, I don't care that it'll kill the printers. Have it couriered to the conference room by 11. He hung up and looked at me with something like respect. Welcome back to the game, Evelyn, he said. I looked down at my Rusty's apron. Coffee stains. A tear in the hem where I'd caught it on the dishwasher last week. Then I untied it, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter. Rusty. I hollered toward the kitchen. Emergency family situation. I'm taking the rest of the day. Rusty stuck his head out, spatula in hand. You got any family left? He asked, baffled. Apparently, I might have one more, I said, nodding toward Graham. I'll make up the hours this weekend. Bring back pie, Rusty said. The good kind, not that sugar-free nonsense. I grabbed my coat and the folder of Lockwood sins and walked out into the cold with a man who had no idea how much trouble he'd just invited into his life and how much trouble I was about to invite into mine. Lockwood Holdings occupied the entire 29th floor of a glass office tower downtown, with a lobby so polished I could see my second thoughts reflected in it. The receptionist's smile faltered for half a second when I said my name. Either she recognized it or she was just surprised someone my age still wore heels. Mr. Lockwood asked me to show you to the conference room, she said quickly. He's in meetings until 3. Perfect. I worked better without an audience. The conference room was the size of my entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a miniature model. Tiny cars, tiny people, tiny problems. The mountains loomed in the distance, snow-capped and uninterested. A young man in an impeccable shirt walked in carrying 3 very large binders and a flash drive. His name tag said James Executive Assistant. Miss Harper, he said, professional but cool. I recognized the type. He'd Googled me. These are the past 5 years of audited financials, debt schedules, and project breakdowns. The supplemental data room is accessible via this drive. Mr. Lockwood said you might need all of it. Thank you, I said. Any particular fires I should look at first? He hesitated. His loyalty was to his paycheck, not his boss. The Tucson development, he said finally, and the Riverview Tech campus. Those keep me up at night. Riverview, I tucked that away. When he left, I opened the first binder and let myself fall down the rabbit hole. You learn a lot about a person from the way their company spends money. By page 20, I could tell Graham had started out disciplined. The early deals were solid, modest leverage, conservative projections, diversified income streams. Then the deals got bigger, riskier, flashier. The Tucson project was a 900-acre mixed-use fantasy in the desert luxury condos, a golf course, shops, a hotel. The kind of project developers build when they've forgotten about recessions. It was financed with short-term bridge loans stacked on top of one another like Jenga blocks. One wobble and the whole thing fell. By hour 3, my head hurt and my coffee had gone cold, but the picture was clear. Lockwood Holdings wasn't dead yet, but it was definitely in the ICU. I started pulling out pages, reorganizing them on the table. Debt here, cash flow there, profitable assets in one pile, vanity projects in another. When Graham finally walked in, he stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? He asked. Triaging, I said. Your company's on the table. I'm figuring out which organs we can live without. He sank into a chair, loosening his tie. For the first time, he looked less like a CEO and more like a kid who'd stayed out past curfew. How bad is it? He asked. I capped my pen. Worse than you think, I said. Better than it looks. That's unhelpfully vague. You have 3 problem children, I said, sliding folders toward him. Tucson, obviously. Riverview Tech, terrible terms, terrible timing. And this little gem, I tapped a project in Austin that looked like it had been financed by a drunk. But you also have unsung heroes. I pulled another stack forward. Your logistics facility in Boise, your industrial park in Kansas City. And these, I held up a thin folder. Small equity positions in a handful of tech and clean energy startups. They're quietly throwing off cash while your big, sexy projects bleed you dry. He leaned forward. I barely pay attention to those, he admitted. We bought in early. They've just been there. Congratulations, I said dryly. Your just been there pile is keeping you from collapse. I walked him through the numbers. I didn't sugarcoat his mistakes, and I didn't dwell on them. There's no point berating someone for the cliff they're already hanging off. What matters is where they plant their hands next. You can survive this, I concluded, if you're willing to kill your darlings. He frowned. Meaning? Sell Tucson, I said, even at a loss. Get out of Riverview before it drags you under. Liquidate this Austin vanity project entirely. Use the proceeds to pay down your most restrictive debt and double down on the boring assets that actually make money. He stared at the stacks of paper like they'd betrayed him. I've spent 2 years talking up Tucson as our crown jewel, he said weakly. The board will scream, I said. Then they'll thank you when you're not bankrupt. They'll say I panicked. You're not panicking. You're cutting off a limb to save the body. There's a difference. Silence. Finally, he sighed. My board chair already thinks I'm reckless, he admitted. He's been circling, pushing for change in leadership. What's his name? I asked, though some part of me already felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Victor Hale, he said. Old money, old school, likes control. My stomach did a slow, unpleasant flip. The name scratched at a memory I hadn't touched into years, an echo from the worst days of my life. Court documents, whispered conversations in hallways, a name I'd seen buried in an acquisition rumor when my own firm was burning. Oh, I said quietly, that's interesting. You know him? Not personally, I said, but I've seen his fingerprints before. I gathered the Tucson folder, the Riverview folder, the little stack of tech investments that didn't match the rest of the portfolio, and the unease in my chest grew. Mr. Lockwood, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I'm going to help you save this company, but you should know something before we go any further. What's that? The last time I saw Victor Hale's name in a financial trail, I said slowly, my son was being led away in handcuffs, and that, my friends, is where this story really starts to get complicated. You remember I told you my name is Evelyn Harper. By this point in the story, I'd stopped feeling like Evie the waitress and started remembering who I'd been before my life went up in flames. The trouble with that is, once a woman like me remembers what she's capable of, somebody going to regret it. Spoiler, it wasn't me. When Graham said Victor Hale, it hit me like someone had slammed a freezer door open in my chest. I'd seen that name before, a footnote in my own tragedy. Back when Harper and Cole was dying its slow, public death, I remember my lawyer mentioning a private equity group sniffing around our client list. I was too busy trying not to drown to care who the vultures were, but later, buried in the paperwork, I'd seen it: Hale Capital Partners. They hadn't come for my firm directly. They'd circled the ruins, buying distressed assets, offering support to clients whose savings had just been used as poker chips by my son. At the time, I'd assumed they were just opportunists. Now I wasn't so sure. Back in Rusty's that night, after my unofficial first day as Lockwood's ghost consultant, I sat at the counter with a cup of coffee that tasted like charred hope and scrolled through old emails on the cracked screen of my ancient laptop. Rusty glanced over. "You look like you're about to say God," he said. "Too expensive," I muttered. "I'm just reviewing my greatest hits of humiliation." I pulled up the files from 2 years earlier. The acquisitions. The letters from third-party firms offering solutions to the chaos my son had created. There it was again, Hale Capital, with a friendly note about absorbing vulnerable client relationships. Vulnerable. I'd been vulnerable enough to glass. I followed that rabbit hole further. Articles I'd ignored back then: small firms imploding, followed by Hale Capital quietly buying pieces of them afterward. Same pattern: scandal, collapse, acquisition. Companies didn't just fall over. Someone was greasing the floor. I pushed my laptop away and rubbed my eyes. "Everything okay, Evie?" Rusty asked. "Depends," I said. "You ever realize the person who kicked you when you were down might have been the one who pushed you in the first place?" He whistled low. "Sounds like you're about to ruin somebody's week." "If I do this right," I said, "it won't just be their week." The next few weeks, I lived to lives. By day, I was back in the game, Harper strategic consultant, in sensible heels and thrift store blazers that passed for professional from the right distance. By night and very early morning, I was Waitress Evie again, slinging pancakes and coffee, fingers smelling faintly of syrup and onions. I'd wipe down a booth at Rusty's, then 4 hours later stand in a Lockwood boardroom, red pen in hand, dissecting capital structures like they were frogs in a high school lab. Graham adapted faster than I thought. Once he got over the embarrassment of being corrected by a woman who'd served him stale coffee, he leaned into it. "You're terrifying," he told me one afternoon as I shredded his Tucson projections. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome." We moved quickly. Under my recommendations, the Tucson project went on the chopping block. We put feelers out to buyers who specialized in distressed developments. The Riverview Tech campus got restructured. We took a hit, but renegotiated the ugliest debt covenants. We quietly sold off a couple of glossy but useless properties with clever press releases about portfolio optimization. In the middle of all that, I hunted for something else: fingerprints. Specifically, Victor Hale's. It started small: odd clauses in loan agreements with banks that seemed a little too friendly with Hale's other companies. Consulting contracts with firms that coincidentally had ex-Hale employees on their boards. A pattern of bad advice that nudged Lockwood closer to the edge, signed by people who'd once sent cheerful emails from addresses ending in @halecapital.com. "So, either your previous advisors were incompetent," I told Graham, tapping the stack, "or someone was leading you by the nose toward a cliff." He frowned. "My CFO swears we vet everyone." "Your CFO is good with numbers," I said, "not people. Whoever set this up knows how to make sabotage look like normal risk-taking." He looked tired. "Do you really think Hale is trying to tank my company?" he asked. "I think," I said slowly, "that someone is setting you up to fail in an eerily familiar pattern. And that man's name keeps appearing like a bad penny. What would he gain?" "Oh, I don't know," I said. "Board control, cheap equity, the satisfaction of proving he's the smartest man in the room." Graham grimaced. "He does enjoy that." "I've met the type," I said. "I used to give them advice. Now I enjoy dismantling them." He gave me a look I couldn't quite place, something between admiration and worry. "You know, Evelyn," he said, "most people would take the settlement money from their ruined life, move to Florida, and dedicate themselves to crossword puzzles. I'm not most people," I said. "And Florida is too humid. Also, I'm not done yet." If this had just been about Lockwood, I might have kept it strictly professional. But every time I saw Hale's name, I thought of Josh. I hadn't spoken to my son since sentencing. He was serving 8 years in a federal facility in Arizona, which is what happens when you make a hobby out of forgery and securities fraud. He'd taken a plea deal, cooperation in exchange for a lighter sentence. Cooperation with whom? That question gnawed at me until I couldn't sleep without wondering what he'd told them and what he'd kept back. One Thursday afternoon, between the lunch rush and a Lockwood meeting, I found myself sitting at my tiny kitchen table, staring at a visitation form I'd printed out and not filled in for a year. I picked up the pen. Last call. I muttered to myself. Either I stay mad forever, or I go ask the idiot what he knows. I checked the boxes. Mother. In-person visitation. I mailed it before I could change my mind. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a plastic chair in a prison visiting room. The kind of institutional beige space that sucks the will to live straight out of your body. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like anxious bees. When they brought Josh in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd always been lanky, boyish. Now he had a hardness to him, like someone had shaved the softness off his face. His hair was cropped short. The compass tattoo on his forearm looked darker against his paler skin. He sat down across from me, hands cuffed at the waist. Mom, he said. I'd rehearsed a lot of speeches about betrayal, disappointment, how he'd taken my name and set it on fire. Instead, what came out was, "You look thin." He huffed a sharp little laugh. "Food here isn't exactly Rusty's." I narrowed my eyes. "You know about Rusty's." "I watched your hearing," he said. "Then I watched the local news." "You think they weren't going to cover fallen advisor flipping burgers at roadside diner?" I grimaced. "Waitressing," I said. "I never flip anything I can't afford to drop." We stared at each other for a minute, mother and son across a table not designed for reconciliation. "I didn't ask you here to rehash everything," I said finally. "We both know what you did. I'm not here to forgive you. Yet." He swallowed. "Then why are you here?" "Because I think the story you told the FBI about your fraud wasn't complete," I said. "And if I'm right, we have a bigger problem than you being an idiot." He flinched, but didn't argue the idiot part. I leaned forward. 3 years ago, I said, before you started moving client funds, did someone approach you, offer you a deal, a shortcut, an opportunity?" His eyes dropped to the table. "Josh," I said warningly, "look at me." He did. "Yes," he said quietly. "There was someone." "Who?" He hesitated. Fear flickered across his face in a way I'd never seen. Not when he was sentenced. Not when they'd led him away. He called himself a consultant, Josh said, from a private equity firm. He said they were looking for innovative ways to acquire premium client portfolios from mid-sized advisors. I felt my stomach go cold. "Did he give you a name?" I asked. "A company?" Josh nodded. "Hale Capital Partners," he said. "The guy's name was Colt something." "Colton." He said he represented senior leadership who wanted to explore a partnership with us. Said if I could demonstrate flexibility with client allocations, they could make me a very wealthy man. I closed my eyes briefly. Hale kept his own hands clean. "Of course he did. Did you tell the FBI that?" I asked. He shifted in his seat. "I told them there was outside influence," he said. "My lawyer said naming a big firm would complicate the plea. They wanted a neat, simple story. Greedy son torpedoes mother's company. It played better on the news." My hands clenched under the table. "God forbid we complicate the narrative," I said tightly. "How many meetings did you have with this Colton?" 3 in person, Josh said. "A dozen calls. Once he realized I could forge your signature and access the systems, he pushed harder. Said they'd bail us out if anything went wrong. Offered to acquire distressed assets if the firm took a hit. Make sure I landed on my feet." I stared at him. "You believed him?" He gave a hollow laugh. "I was arrogant and stupid, Mom. I thought, this is how the big boys do it. They just don't talk about it on CNBC. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit. "When it all blew up, he vanished," Josh said. "New number. No LinkedIn. Nothing." My lawyer said without proof, naming him would just look like I was trying to shift blame. "Did you ever see anything written?" I asked. "Emails? Messages? Burner accounts," he said. He was careful. "But," he hesitated. "But what?" "I did keep one thing," Josh admitted. "He gave me a business card the first day. Told me to keep it close. It's your golden ticket." I panicked when I got arrested. I flushed everything else, but the card. I shoved it behind the insulation in the attic at the old house. "The house the bank repossessed," I said. "Yeah," he said, "but they haven't remodeled it. I saw pictures online. It's just Sitting there, I sat back, mind racing. A business card wasn't much, but it was something. A thread. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. He let out a long breath. Because you already thought the worst of me, he said, voice rough. At least if I kept it simple, the story was mine. I screwed up. I went to prison. If I dragged some shadowy mastermind into it and nobody believed me, I'd look pathetic on top of criminal. Congratulations, I said. You managed to be criminal and cowardly. He flinched. Good. He deserved the bruise. But then I sighed. You were also being manipulated by someone who knew exactly what button to push, I said. Ambition, approval, my name. His eyes got wet. He blinked hard. You're going after him, he said. Not a question. Yes, I said. That's dangerous, Mom. So is letting men like that keep playing this game, I said. And I've got more life behind me than ahead. My risk calculus is different now. He swallowed. Mom? Yes? He held my gaze. If you're going to burn your life down to get back at this guy, don't do it alone. I won't, I said. I'm bringing friends this time. I stood. He looked suddenly young again, my boy, the one who used to fall asleep with a math workbook on his chest. Evelyn? He said. Funny how he used my first name when he was scared. Yes, I'm sorry. I nodded once. That's a good start, I said. We'll see what you do with the rest of your life. The first time I met Victor Hale in person, I understood immediately why so many people let him ruin them. He had that old money-ease perfect salt and pepper hair, bespoke suit, the kind of posture that said, I've never had to sprint for a bus in my life. He wore wealth like a second skin, not a costume. The next Lockwood board meeting was called to approve our strategic divestiture plan, fancy language for we're selling off the dumb stuff to avoid bankruptcy. I walked into the conference room as Harper, external consultant, and watched Hale's eyes track me like a hawk seeing something unexpected near its nest. Graham cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, you've all seen the preliminary reports from Harper Strategic. Miss Harper has spent the last few weeks reviewing our capital structure and advising on the proposed divestitures. I've asked her to walk us through the plan. One of the older directors, a woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, raised a brow at me in something approaching curiosity. Hale just smiled. I'd seen that smile before. On defense attorneys and men in bars who thought no was a starting point. Miss Harper, Hale said smoothly, perhaps you can summarize your credentials for those who haven't read your file. Emphasis on file, like he'd been up late reading my old headlines. Of course, I said pleasantly. I spent 35 years in advisory and portfolio management, most recently as managing partner of Harper & Cole. I specialized in restructuring distressed portfolios and turnaround strategies. No mention of the unfortunate scandal? Hale said, Fox apologetic. I realize it was your son involved, not you, but still, context is important. The air in the room cooled 10 degrees. Graham stiffened, but I touched his arm under the table. Let him come, I thought. I'd been waiting for this. Yes, I said calmly. My son committed fraud. He forged my signature and used our firm as his personal casino. The FBI cleared me of wrongdoing, but my reputation died harder than my firm did. Hence my work as an external consultant now. There was a small silence. People shifted in their chairs, embarrassed for me. I smiled. The upside, I continued, is that I now recognize the smell of systemic misuse of leverage long before the feds have to explain it to anyone. Lockwood hired me for that nose. A couple of board members smiled despite themselves. Hale's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. By all means, he said, tell us where we've gone astray. I did. I walked them through the Tucson carnage, the Riverview mess, the Austin Vanity Project. I showed charts. I was merciless. You can preserve long-term viability, I concluded, by disposing of these 3 high-risk projects, paying down your most restrictive debt, and fully capitalizing the assets that are actually profitable. The directors peppered me with questions. Most of them were pointed but fair. Hale's were different. Isn't it true, he asked at one point, that your own firm collapsed under your leadership? My son's crimes collapsed it, I said. My leadership kept it solvent for 3 decades before that. But if you're asking whether I'm familiar with how quickly a company can disintegrate when someone is playing games in the back office, yes. Intimately. His jaw tightened. He knew I knew something. He just didn't know what. The vote was tense. We needed 2/3 approval to move forward with the divestitures. When the hands went up, I counted quickly. 8 for, 3 against, 1 abstention. We had it. Motion carries, the secretary announced. Graham exhaled. A couple of directors visibly relaxed. Hale sat very still, fingers steepled. Well, he said finally, it seems the board has spoken. He looked straight at me when he added, I hope, for all our sakes, that Miss Harper's judgment this time is better than it was in her last act. I smiled like I hadn't just mentally added his name to the top of my list. Oh, I don't know, Mr. Hale, I said sweetly. So far, my judgment in this act is excellent. He gave me a long, assessing look. It was the expression of a man who'd been sliding knives into people's backs for decades and couldn't quite believe the waitress he miscalculated 2 weeks ago had come to the party armed. Good, I thought. Let him wonder. I didn't literally break into my old house. Legally speaking, I suppose it was trespassing. Morally speaking, I felt the universe owed me one. The bank still owned it, and it was sitting empty and sold unrenovated, just paused. Like my old life, frozen mid-sentence. I drove there on a Sunday afternoon in a rental car that smelled like someone else's perfume. The neighborhood was quieter than I remembered. My rose bushes were dead. I stood on the sidewalk for a full 3 minutes before my feet moved. The side door lock hadn't been changed. Of course it hadn't. Banks are efficient with numbers, not keys. Inside, it smelled like dust and distant memories. The imprint on the living room wall where my diploma used to hang. The rug gone. The small indentations in the carpet where our sofa had been. I went straight for the attic. The ladder creaked under my weight. The insulation glittered under the weak light of a single bulb. I kicked aside old boxes some bank employee had shoved aside when they took inventory. The piece of drywall Josh had once broken as a kid, playing pirate. I'd yelled. He'd cried. We'd patched it together badly. I ran my hand along the edge. There's soft give where there should have been resistance. I peeled back the cut square of drywall, wincing as dust rained down. Behind the crumbling insulation, taped to a wooden beam, was a zippered sandwich bag. Inside, a simple, expensive business card. Colton Reed, Senior Vice President, Hale Capital Partners. On the back, in neat black ink, when you're ready to play for real, call me. A number. Now disconnected. I was sure. I turned the card over in my fingers. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a gun, and it still smelled faintly of powder. I took photos, front and back. Then I slid the card back into the bag and tucked it into my purse. On my way out, I paused in the doorway of what used to be Josh's room. The posters were gone, but the faint outlines where the sun had faded the walls remained. Like ghosts. You picked the wrong mother to screw with, I said quietly to the empty house, to Colton Reed, to Victor Hale, to whoever else had seen my family as a convenient stepping stone. Then I locked the door behind me and left the past exactly where I needed it to be, pinned to a timeline I was about to hand to someone with subpoena power. If life were a movie, I'd march straight into an FBI office, slam the card on the table, and say something dramatic like, I think you missed a villain. Real life is messier. I still had to pay rent, and Lockwood still needed saving. Also, I'd already spent months of my life being questioned by men with badges. Volunteering for that again required deep breathing and aspirin. I started small. I called the number on the card. Disconnected. No surprise. I dug into public records on Hale Capital. They had their fingers in a dozen industries. They specialized in distressed acquisitions, which is rich, considering I was starting to suspect they also specialized in creating the distress. I pulled court filings on 3 other firms that had imploded under internal fraud in the last 5 years. Guess who showed up in the aftermath, picking up assets at discounts? Victor Hale. It was like seeing the same greasy thumbprint on multiple crime scenes. That night at Rusty's, I refilled coffee for a cop I vaguely knew from the neighborhood. Mid-40s, kind face, cynicism barely contained under his uniform. Hey Pete, I said lightly. You know anybody over in white collar at the bureau? He raised a brow. You planning a heist, Evie? Planning to complain about the last one, I said. I have a name I think they'd like. He scribbled something on a napkin and slid it over. Agent Sarah Mendoza, he said. She's the one who caught that Ponzi idiot 3 years ago. Tell her Pete sent you. I stared at the number, took a breath, pocketed the napkin. It took me a week to work up to calling. When I finally did, I was in the alley behind Rusty's on my 15-minute break, apron still on, grease smell in my hair. Agent Mendoza, a brisk voice answered. Agent, my name is Evelyn Harper, I said. 2 years ago, I was the managing partner in a firm your colleagues investigated after my son committed fraud. I have information about a possible pattern involving Hale Capital Partners. Silence, just long enough to make me second-guess everything. Then, Miss Harper, yes, I know who you are. What kind of information? The kind that comes on embossed cardstock, I said, and the kind that shows up in acquisition records. I think your random fraud cases have a common denominator. She didn't laugh, but her tone shifted. I can't discuss ongoing investigations over the phone, she said carefully. But if you'd like to share anything, we can set up a meeting. Just tell me one thing, I said. Is Hale Capital already on your radar? A pause. Miss Harper, she said, I can neither confirm nor deny, so that's a yes, I interrupted. Good, because I think I'm standing in the middle of their next attempted takeover. That got her. Where are you right now? She asked. Clocking back into a diner in 10 minutes, I said. But if you want something more glamorous, I also consult for Lockwood Holdings. Ah, she said softly. Lockwood. Interesting. I squinted at the brick wall. How interesting. Interesting enough that I'd like to send a couple of agents to speak with you in person, she said. Soon. How soon? The back door creaked open. Rusty stuck his head out. Evie, your break's up. And there are two guys in suits at table 3 asking for you by name. They look like they swallowed a law book. I stared at him, then at my phone. Agent Mendoza cleared her throat. Soon, she repeated. Say, now. I turned around slowly and peered through the narrow diner window. Two men in dark suits, ties to straight, hair to neat. They were sitting at table 3, looking both out of place and somehow inevitable. Agent, I said, did you just send the cavalry to my place of employment? I find people where they are, she said. Go talk to them. And Miss Harper? Yes, thank you for calling. I hung up and walked back into the diner. Rusty gave me a look. You in trouble again? Hopefully, I said, untying my apron. Someone else is. I approached table 3. The older of the two stood up, flashed a badge. Miss Harper, he said. I'm Special Agent Kwan. This is Special Agent Ruiz. We'd like to talk to you about Victor Hale. I smiled, slow and sharp. Well, I said, sliding into the booth like I owned it. Isn't that a coincidence? I'd like to talk to you about him too. Agent Kwan opened a folder. Inside, I saw photos, printouts of some of the same articles I'd found, plus a few I hadn't. Company logos, headlines, court docket numbers. Ruiz set a small digital recorder on the table. Miss Harper, he said, we believe Hale Capital may be involved in a coordinated pattern of financial manipulation and corporate espionage. Until now, we've been missing a certain link. He slid a photo across to me. It was grainy, taken from a distance. A man in a suit, sitting at an outdoor caf table across from someone with their back to the camera. The man facing the camera was Victor Hale. The man with his back turned, hair just long enough to recognize even in bad resolution, was my son. My throat went dry. Do you recognize either of these men? Kwan asked. Yes, I said. One is the man who thinks he's God. The other is my son. Kwan nodded once, as if a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. We thought so, he said. Your son has already given us a partial statement about being approached by a representative of Hale Capital. Your name came up again when we started looking at Lockwood. He leaned forward. We think Hale's been engineering collapses, he said, pushing firms into crisis, then buying the pieces. But what we don't have yet is him on record admitting it, or attempting it, in real time. Ruiz glanced at me. That, he said, is where you come in. I looked from one to the other. Let me guess, I said. You want me to be your eyes and ears in Lockwood. Keep doing what I'm doing, only this time, with your tape recorder in my bra. Ruiz tried not to smile. Failed. Something like that, he said. There's an emergency board meeting next week, isn't there? To evaluate the CEO's performance? Let me guess, I said. You've been reading the memos. We have sources, Kwan said. We believe Hale will use that meeting to push for Graham's removal and orchestrate a liquidity crisis that would let him scoop up control. And you want proof, I said. Not just suspicion. Yes, Kwan said. We want him on record. We want his pattern documented. And Ruiz added, we'd like him to walk himself into a trap set by the woman he thought he destroyed by proxy. I sat back. It was one thing to fantasize about revenge in the quiet darkness of my sad little apartment. It was another thing entirely to be handed the matches and a can of gasoline by the federal government. All right, I said slowly. I'll help you. But understand this. I pointed a finger at them. I'm not just doing this for you. I'm doing this for me, for my clients, for my idiot son, for every person this man has ever treated like a disposable pawn while he rearranged the board. Kwon nodded. We don't care why you do it, he said. We just care that you do. Ruiz reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black object. This is the latest generation, he said, setting it in my palm. Secure, untraceable, designed for situations exactly like the one you're walking into. We'll brief you fully before the meeting, set up a safe way to communicate. The device was lighter than it looked. It hummed faintly in my hand like possibility. Miss Harper, Kwon said quietly, this is dangerous. Hale is powerful, and he's been doing this a long time. If at any point you want to walk away, I closed my fingers around the wire. Agent, I said, 2 years ago I watched my life burn down while people like him sold marshmallows in front of the fire. I've already lost the worst of what I had to lose. I smiled, all teeth. You're not asking me to walk into danger, I said. You're giving me a map back to the man holding the matches. They exchanged a look. Then we'll see you at the briefing, Ruiz said. And Miss Harper? Yes? Don't do anything too creative before we get our evidence. I laughed. No promises, I said, but I'll try to let you have your day in court before I have mine. They left a business card and a time for the pre-board meeting briefing. Then they walked out of Rusty's, leaving the faint smell of government-issue cologne behind. Rusty wandered over, wiping his hands on his apron. So, he said, eyeing the card on the table, on a scale of 1 to I should start looking for a new waitress. How much trouble are you in? I picked up the card and the wire, slipping both into my pocket. Oh, Rusty, I said, you have no idea. I looked out at the highway, at the cars streaming past, at the neon sign flickering between Rusty's and Usty. I'm about to walk into a boardroom, I said softly, more to myself than to him, wired up by the FBI, sitting across from the man who orchestrated the destruction of my life, and he doesn't even know I'm coming. I smiled, sharp and certain. Poor bastard, you've stuck with me this far, so you already know. I'm not the type of woman who goes quietly. Not when my name's on the line. Not when my son was used as someone else's puppet. And definitely not when a man like Victor Hale thinks he's about to get away with turning my life into a footnote. This is where the waitress stops pouring coffee and starts lighting fuses. 2 days before the emergency Lockwood board meeting, I found myself walking into a federal building downtown instead of Rusty's. If you've never been in an FBI conference room, imagine a DMV with better suits. Agent Kwon and Agent Ruiz were already inside, along with a woman I recognized from my earlier phone call, Agent Mendoza. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back like she didn't have time for nonsense. Miss Harper, she said, standing. Good to finally meet you in person. Likewise, I said. Nice to be invited to a government building for something other than explaining where all the money went. She cracked a smile. We read your file. You were very clear about where the money went. My son wasn't, I said. That's why we're here. They had a whiteboard, photos, names, arrows. This wasn't their first dance with Hale Capital Partners. Kwon tapped the board. Here's what we know, he said. Over the last 7 years, we've identified at least 9 mid-sized firms that collapsed under suspiciously similar circumstances: sudden internal fraud, liquidity crises, badly structured debt. In almost every case, someone affiliated with Hale Capital stepped in after the collapse, offering rescue capital or buying distressed assets at steep discounts. He circled 3 logos. Your firm, Harper & Cole, then Baird and Lanning in Phoenix, then a boutique shop in Dallas. In all 3 cases, we have some evidence that someone from Hale or their orbit had contact with internal staff beforehand, but nothing that sticks to Hale himself. I nodded at the board. And now they're trying to add Lockwood to their collection. Ruiz slid a folder across to me. Here's where it gets interesting, he said. We've been monitoring Hale's communications with his senior team. He's careful, but not perfect. We picked up discussions about an overconfident founder ripe for discipline and a proven acquisition model being applied to a Denver-based platform. Graham, I said. Looks that way, Mendoza said. We also have evidence that one of your former junior analysts at Harper & Cole now works in Hale's Special Projects division. Name ring a bell? She pointed to a photo. A man in his early 30s, slick suit, practiced smirk. Colton Reed. I stared. He used to bring me coffee, I said, then ask questions about risk models like a kid asking how to hotwire a car. Apparently he graduated to the real thing, Ruiz said. He's Hale's current hatchet man. He's the one who approached your son. Your son's statement, plus the business card you recovered, plus Hale's acquisition pattern, that's enough for us to push this further. But what we're missing is a live, on-record conversation tying all these threads together. And that, Quan said, is where the board meeting comes in. He opened a sleek black case and pulled out something that looked like a button off a coat. This, he said, is your microphone. I picked it up. Lightweight, unassuming. If I'd found it on the floor at Rusty's, I'd have swept it into the trash. Battery? I asked. 6 hours, he said. Encrypted transmission. Real-time monitoring. We'll be in a van nearby listening. Ruiz slid over a tiny earpiece. For you, he said. We won't talk much during the meeting to risky, but we can give you a go or no go, and we'll tell you when we have enough. Comforting, I said. Human podcasts in my head. Mendoza leaned forward, hands folded. Our goal is simple, she said. We want Hale to incriminate himself. Specifically, we want him to admit on his own initiative that he has engineered or encouraged crises in target firms in order to profit from their collapse. Mention of your son, Harper, and Cole, or any of the others would be ideal. I don't control what he says, I pointed out. No, she agreed. But we've watched him enough to know his weaknesses. Ego, contempt. He likes smart people, but he likes them dependent on him. He will want to recruit you. He'll want you to feel special. That's when he brags. So you want me to let him seduce me professionally, I said. Then record the pillow talk. Quan blinked. That's one way to put it, he said. I sighed. All right, I said. What's the plan? Step 1, Ruiz said, ticking it off on his fingers. You go into that meeting like you always do. As Graham's consultant, you present your updated turnaround numbers. The company's improving. That threatens Hale's plan, so he'll push back harder than before. Step 2, Mendoza said, there'll be a moment there always is when he tries to corner you. In a break, after the meeting, maybe even before, he'll start the pitch. You let him talk. You ask questions that lead him further. Step 3, Quan said, once we have enough on tape, we move. If he hands us a clean confession, we'll arrest him right then. If not, we might wait, but you'll know once we've got what we need. I thought about my son, alone in a cell because he'd believed someone like Hale would catch him when he fell. I have a condition, I said. Mendoza raised a brow. You're not exactly in a position to bargain, Miss Harper. Wrong, I said. You want me to walk into a boardroom with a snake who already destroyed my life once. You need someone he trusts enough to show his fangs. That gives me a little negotiating power. She gestured. Let's hear it. When this is over, I said, if we nail him if he goes down, and we can show he orchestrated this pattern, I want you to revisit my son's case. I'm not asking you to erase what he did. He belongs in a cell, but I want his cooperation, real cooperation, taken into account. Make sure the judge sees the whole story. Quan and Ruiz exchanged a quick glance. Mendoza nodded slowly. We can't promise outcomes, she said, but we can promise we'll put everything we have into a formal recommendation for sentence modification. If he helps us close this circle, that matters. Good, I said, because he's already given you more than he gave himself credit for. Mendoza looked at me closely. You're really going to do this? She asked. It could get ugly. If Hale suspects anything, I'm 70, I said. My son's in prison. My reputation's been used as a cautionary tale. What exactly is he going to take from me now my diner tips? She huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh. You're a dangerous woman, Miss Harper, she said. Thank you, I said. Let's make it dangerous for the right people this time. The morning of the board meeting, I got dressed like a woman planning to politely dismantle a man's career. Black slacks, white blouse, navy blazer I'd found in a consignment shop and had tailored within an inch of its life, practical heels, minimal jewelry. I pinned the tiny microphone inside my lapel, just under the fold where no one would see it. Ruiz tucked the earpiece into place, his fingers quick and impersonal. You're live, he said quietly. We've got you. I imagined the van headphones, laptops, coffee cups, strangers listening to my heartbeat in between balance sheets. Try not to let me bore you, I said. Quan handed me a thin folder. We'll be a block away, he said. If things go sideways, genuinely sideways, say the words, I think I'm done here, out loud. We'll take that as a signal to intervene, one way or another. Understood, I said. Mendoza walked me to the building entrance. We paused just outside the revolving door. If at any point you want to call this off, she said, no shame. We'll find another way. I looked up at the 30-story glass tower with Lockwood's name on it. I walked into a courtroom knowing half the city thought I'd robbed them blind. I said, this is just a conference room full of overpaid men. I'll be fine. She stepped back and let me go. The receptionist greeted me with a little more warmth than last time. Word had gotten around Harper Strategic wasn't just the scandal lady anymore. The early numbers were in. Our triage was working. Good morning, Miss Harper, she said. They're assembling now. I walked into the boardroom to find everyone already seated. Graham looked tired but determined. The sharp cheekbones woman Amelia Grant, I'd learned, sat with a stack of papers in front of her, expression unreadable. And at the far end of the table, like a spider at the center of its web, sat Victor Hale. He smiled when he saw me. Full wattage, polite, predatory. Miss Harper, he said, back to tell us which pieces of Mr. Lockwood's toy set we're allowed to keep. Back to show you the difference between a toy and a real business, I said pleasantly, taking my seat near Graham. His smile flickered just a fraction. Good. I liked the ones who didn't know how to handle being teased back. The meeting started with the usual formalities. Minutes approved, previous action items, a slide deck so dry it could have absorbed a flood. Then Graham nodded to me. Evelyn, he said, would you walk the board through the updated projections? I stood and clicked the remote. Slide 1. Clean, simple, a graph of net cash flow over the last 6 months, with a new line showing projected improvement if the divestitures proceeded. As you can see, I said, since we implemented the initial restructuring plan, we've already reduced interest expenses by 12% and stabilized short-term liquidity. The sale of the Austin property closed last week, and the Tucson buyer has signed an LOI with favorable terms considering the less than ideal state of the project. A murmur around the table. Slide 2. Debt maturity ladder, color-coded. By redirecting proceeds to your most restrictive facilities, I continued, you've reduced your near-term covenant pressure. If we follow through with the Riverview restructuring, Lockwood moves from clinging to the edge to standing on reasonably solid ground within the next 2 quarters. Amelia was nodding. A couple of the other directors were scribbling notes. You could feel the tension in the room easing. Hale's face, though, stayed perfectly neutral. I changed to the next slide, one that hadn't been in the original deck for distribution, only in the version I'd brought. Now, I said, it's also important to understand how we got here in the first place. Hale's gaze sharpened. The pattern over the last 3 years, I said, clicking through charts, shows a steady increase in leverage, yes, but not random, concentrated in certain projects. Tucson, Riverview, Austin, each one bedazzling, hyped, aggressively financed. I pointed to another column, and each one, I said lightly, supported and encouraged by external advisors with ties to the same private equity ecosystem. I didn't say Hale's name. I didn't have to. The implication was there. Are you implying, Hale cut in smoothly, that outside advisors are to blame for Mr. Lockwood's decisions? I'm stating, I said, that Mr. Lockwood was given uniformly aggressive advice by advisors who stood to benefit if his company ended up distressed. A ripple went through the room. Amelia tilted her head, considering me. That's a serious suggestion, she said. Do you have documentation? Oh, I have documentation, I said. I'm an old woman. Documentation is my love language. However, I think we'd all be better served reviewing that in the context of the broader mitigation plan rather than turning this into a blame game. I clicked to the next slide. Keep him hungry, I thought. A man like Hale can't resist a secret. The rest of the presentation was calm, rational, boring even if you weren't the type to get excited about EBITDA margins. But under the numbers, a story was forming, one in which Lockwood was stumbling towards safety, not falling helplessly into the abyss. That story did not suit Hale at all. When I sat down, he folded his hands on the table. Thank you, Miss Harper, he said, tone so smooth it practically slid off the walls. That was thorough. He turned to the board. However, he said, I remain unconvinced that this slow bleed approach is in our best interest. Lockwood has always thrived on bold moves, not timid retrenchment. Our creditors are nervous. Our lenders are impatient. There is another option. Here it comes, I thought. The rescue package from the arsonist. Hale pressed a button. A new deck popped up on the screen. His logo, his fonts, his world. Hale Capital, he said, has prepared a bridge financing proposal that would allow Lockwood to maintain its strategic projects while relieving near-term pressure. A vote of no confidence in current leadership is not required, but it may, in fact, be prudent to consider a management transition as part of a comprehensive solution. There it was, dressed in nice language. Fire Graham. Take the money. Hand him the keys. I let the board argue. Some were understandably tempted. The numbers on their surface looked shiny, fresh capital, breathing room, aggressive growth. Others, like Amelia, looked at them the way you'd look at a used car with a suspiciously scrubbed odometer. This financing comes with warrants, she noted. Convertible to equity at, that's a generous discount. We like to align incentives, Hale said mildly. Whose? I asked. He ignored me. Hale steered the conversation artfully, pushing buttons, sowing doubt. His real target wasn't the company, it was their perception of Graham as reckless versus his own polished stability. At one point, he looked directly at me. Miss Harper, he said, as a consultant, perhaps you can offer us a neutral perspective. Should Lockwood bet on a turnaround plan crafted by someone whose last firm collapsed under her watch? Or on a capital infusion from a globally respected institution with a proven track record? Oh, he wanted it. He wanted me defensive, small, on the back foot. I smiled. I think, I said, that you're comparing apples to grenades, Mr. Hale. My last firm was destroyed by fraud I didn't see coming because I trusted the wrong people with too much access. I held his gaze. An error I've been correcting ever since. The room was so quiet you could have heard a stock price drop. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Graham jumped in. I propose we break for 15 minutes, he said tightly. Give everyone time to review both proposals. The chair agreed. People began to stand, stretch, whisper. I stayed seated. I could feel Hale's eyes on me as clearly as if they were fingertips on my skin. Miss Harper, he said after a moment, perhaps we could chat privately? And there it was, the opening the FBI had been waiting for. In my ear, the tiniest crackle. Ruiz's voice, a ghost at the back of my brain. If he asks to speak one-on-one, go. We're rolling. I looked up at Hale, put on my best intrigued but cautious expression, and stood. Why not? I said, always happy to hear the wisdom of the globally respected. He didn't take me far, just down the hall to a smaller side conference room, the kind they use for deposition prep and quiet firings. He closed the door behind us, not locked, but shut. I took a seat. He didn't. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city like it belonged to him. You're an interesting woman, Miss Harper, he said, still facing the glass. I get that a lot, I said, usually right before trouble. He turned, smiling faintly. I read everything about your case, he said. It was instructive. Instructive how? I asked. That a single weak link can bring down an entire structure, he said. A son, an assistant, a partner. One person with access and poor judgment can undo decades of work. Yes, I said. I've noticed, especially when they're being nudged. He tilted his head, amused. Are you implying your son was manipulated into committing fraud? He asked. A convenient story. Time to lay a card on the table. Just one. I'm implying, I said, that my son was approached by one of your people, a Colton Reed, 3 years ago, for the first time. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, annoyance. Colton speaks too freely, he said. Always has. My heart stuttered. In my ear, the faint sound of someone breathing that wasn't me. Don't jump, I told myself. Let him keep talking. Hale Capital has many employees, he continued smoothly. I can't be responsible for every overeager associate who thinks they can impress me by pitching questionable schemes. That's funny, I said, because the scheme seems to have your fingerprints all over it. Approach junior staff, dangle wealth, encourage them to reallocate client funds creatively. Then when it blows up, swoop in to rescue what's left. He smiled thinly. You give me too much credit, he said. Some situations simply present opportunities. Harper and Cole, I said. Baird and Lanning, that firm in Dallas. And now, conveniently, Lockwood. He shrugged. Businesses fail all the time, he said. Some deserve to be saved, others do not. And you get to decide which is which. Someone has to, he said. Most founders are children playing at capitalism. They overreach, they underhedge, they fall in love with vanity projects. My firm rewards discipline. We punish foolishness, With prison? I asked softly. Because my son isn't just a lesson in your little Bible of markets. He's a human being rotting in a cell while you write off the whole affair as overeager associates. His gaze sharpened. For a moment, the mask slipped. He broke the law, Hale said. He knew the risks. I didn't forge those signatures for him. No, I said. You just handed him the pen. Silence stretched between us. In my ear, a murmur too quiet to make out. The agents were talking. Good, let them. I took a breath. What's your endgame here, Mr. Hale? I asked. With Lockwood. He considered me. Do you truly want to know? He asked. I asked. Didn't I? He moved closer. Not threatening exactly. Just enough to make it clear we were allies or enemies. No in between. Lockwood is a fine platform, he said. Strong assets. Good relationships. A decent brand. Burdened unfortunately by a CEO who believes headlines instead of numbers. Graham, I said. He chases glory, Hale said mildly. Projects with his name all over them. Tucson, Riverview, Austin. He's over-leveraged, overexposed, and emotionally attached to his mistakes. He needs to go before he drags the rest of us under. And your solution? I asked. Relieve him of command, Hale said. Install a caretaker CEO of our choosing. Bring in our capital on our terms. Rationalize the portfolio. And own him, I said. He didn't bother denying it. That's how we create value, he said. We take control from those who've proven they can't handle it. Like my son, I said. You keep circling back to him, Hale said, almost bored. He was a test. A minor experiment by junior staff that spiraled because he wasn't as clever as he thought. A test, I repeated. What kind of test? He raised a brow. You know how innovation works, Miss Harper, he said. Pilot programs, small-scale trials before broader rollout. Your firm presented an opportunity. The words hung in the air like smoke. Pilot programs, trial, broader rollout. In my ear, the faint click of a button. Someone marking the moment. I kept my face neutral. You destroyed my life as a pilot program, I said slowly. He rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic, he said. Your son destroyed your life. We merely observed and gained some valuable insights. Like what? I asked. That family firms are surprisingly vulnerable, he said. That regulators are slow. That the market will accept almost any narrative if it comes with the right amount of scandal. That you could replicate it, I said. He smiled, pleased. Precisely, he said. Your firm taught us that. You should be proud you were the proof of concept for a very successful acquisition strategy. There it was. The confession. My hands wanted to shake. I clenched them around the edge of the chair. Incredible, I said. And you came out of it clean. Because I didn't break the law, he said. Not in any way you can prove. I never instructed anyone to commit fraud. I never ordered a transfer. I simply presented options. People chose their own ruin. You really believe that, I murmured. You really believe you're clean. I am clean, he said. I'm necessary. I impose order on chaos. If a few undisciplined players fall along the way, that's the cost of efficiency. I thought of Josh, of my clients watching their balances drop to numbers that didn't cover their next mortgage payment. You sound like you're talking about broken machinery, I said. Not people. I don't make that distinction in business, he said. In my ear, Ruiz's voice very soft. We have enough. Stay with him a little longer if you can. Anything about current plans, especially Lockwood, is gravy. All right, I said. Let's talk now. Veteran thief to petty criminal. He stiffened. I'm not, oh please, I cut in. Save it for the jury. You're not just buying carcasses, Mr. Hale. You're breeding the disease. He stared at me assessing. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. You know, he said, I rather like you. You see the game. You don't flinch. I flinched, I said. 2 years ago. I'm done with that now. He paced slowly. You're wasted on diner shifts and hand-holding fallen CEOs, he said. Let me be blunt. Join me. I beg your pardon? I asked. Join Hale Capital, he repeated. Not some junior role. Strategic. Partner-level influence. You understand risk. You understand people. You're ruthless when you need to be. I can use that. In exchange for what? I asked. My soul? My ethics? My remaining good hip? He smiled. In exchange for being on the winning side, he said. You'd be amazed how quickly your reputation can be rehabilitated with the right resources. We can rewrite your story. No longer the woman whose son destroyed her firm, but the seasoned survivor who now prevents others from making the same mistakes. We'd parade you on panels, quote you in the press, make you whole. I let the temptation sit between us. Because it was tempting, in a sick way. The thought of a clean narrative, of doors reopening, of my name on conference programs and something other than parentheses. You'd launder my reputation, I said, in exchange for me helping you launder your crimes. If you insist on seeing it that way, he said. I see it as mutual benefit. You help us identify vulnerable targets. We make sure the rescues are executed cleanly. No messy sons with forged signatures this time. And Lockwood? I asked quietly. Collateral, he said with a shrug. A case study. There are plenty more where they came from. This is evolution, Miss Harper. Adapt or become extinct. I stood slowly. You know what the funny thing is, Mr. Hale? I said. What's that? He asked. You really did choose the wrong woman. His smile dimmed. How so? He asked. I met his gaze dead on. Because I already adapted, I said. I learned how your kind operates. I learned what it feels like to lose everything. And then I learned the one thing you never did. And that is, he asked, how to get back up, I said. Without becoming you. In my ear, Ruiz again. We're moving. Play it cool. 2 minutes. Hale stepped closer, irritation creeping into his voice. Think very carefully about what you're turning down, he said. You're a waitress with a consultancy in name only. I'm offering you a way to matter again. I laughed. Oh, honey, I said. You really haven't been paying attention. I walked past him and reached for the door. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Just enough to stop me. Don't walk away from this, he said softly. You won't like what happens if you do. And that's when I said it. Clear, firm. Just loud enough for the microphone and anyone in the hallway. I think I'm done here. His grip tightened. What did you say? I said. I repeated. I'm done. Then I opened the door and walked straight into the arms of the FBI. Agent Kwan was first through the doorway, badge held high. Victor Hale, he said, voice sharp. Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for your arrest. Behind him, Agent Ruiz, 2 more agents I didn't know, and a thick wall of hell energy. For half a second, Hale looked genuinely surprised. Then the mask snapped back into place. This is absurd, he said. On what grounds? Kwan handed him a paper. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, he recited. Securities fraud, racketeering, aiding and abetting. We can go over the rest at the field office. Hale laughed, actually laughed. You have no case, he said. I've never instructed anyone to break the law. I have the best attorneys in the country and a very loud mouth, Ruiz said pleasantly. Which, lucky for us, you just used in front of a federal informant wearing a wire. Hale froze. Slowly, he turned to look at me. All the charm, the polish, the condescension, it vanished. What replaced it was pure, cold fury. You, he whispered. Yes, I said. Me, the waitress. You really should have left me alone. He lunged forward half a step like he might do something deeply stupid. The agents closed in. He stopped. You think this will change anything? He hissed. You think locking me up will fix your pathetic little life? Your son is still a criminal. You're still a joke. Probably, I said. But I'll be a joke who helped put you in orange. That's worth something to me. Ruiz stepped in, cuffs ready. Hands, please, he said. Hale pulled back his shoulders like a man walking onto a stage. This is a mistake, he said loudly. My counsel will tear this apart. Everyone in this building will pay for this embarrassment. Ruiz snapped the cuffs around his wrists. That's the nice thing about evidence, Ruiz said mildly. Juries love it. They led him past me. He stopped just close enough to lean in. This isn't over, he muttered. For you, it's just starting, I said. For me, this part's the finale. The agents escorted him down the hall. From the corner of my eye, I saw a cluster of Lockwood employees staring, phones halfway raised, unsure whether to film. Amelia appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, then narrowing. She looked at me. Miss Harper, she said, voice low. What just happened? I exhaled. Long story, I said. Short version? Your globally respected capital partner just confessed to using companies like yours as crash test dummies. The FBI's been listening. It would be in your best interest to cooperate. She looked past me at Hale, receding toward the elevators and handcuffs. Interesting, she said. I do love a good plot twist. Graham appeared behind her, face pale. Evelyn, he said. Did you? Was that? I held up a hand. We'll talk in the boardroom, I said, preferably with counsel present, and maybe some water. My mouth tastes like adrenaline. The next few hours were chaotic. FBI agents moved through the Lockwood offices, politely but firmly asking for document preservation. IT was instructed not to delete anything. Legal counsel was summoned. The board members were corralled into a room and given the kind of speech that makes even rich men sweat. Amelia sat through it all with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. Hale's seat at the board table sat empty, his leather chair like a shed skin. After what felt like a small eternity, the initial rush subsided. The agents withdrew to their van to coordinate the next steps. The board drifted into corners, whispering. I found myself in Graham's office, the door closed. The city spread out below us like nothing had happened. He stared at me. You were working with the FBI, he said softly. Yes, I said. They approached me at Rusty's. I said yes. They needed someone close enough to Hale to get him talking. That turned out to be me. You could have told me, he said. I couldn't, I replied. Legally, practically, and for your own protection. If he caught even a whiff of this, he'd have changed tactics or run, and you'd have lost everything. He sank into his chair. I feel like I've been hit by a truck, he said. You were, I said. The truck just happened to hit the man behind it too. He looked up, tired eyes searching my face. So what happens now? He asked. Now, I said. The feds build their case. His emails, his calls, his little army of Coltons, they'll squeeze them. Hale will try to bluff. They'll offer deals. Eventually, he'll either take one or go to trial. Either way, his halo slips. And Lockwood? I nodded toward the stack of documents on his desk. That depends on you, I said. With Hale out, his rescue proposal evaporates. The board's going to panic for a minute, then they'll realize our plan is the only sane option left. If you can keep your ego out of it and follow through, this company survives. He was quiet for a long moment. You saved my company, he said at last. And you used it as bait to catch the man who destroyed your life. Multitasking, I said. Even at my age, it's possible. He laughed weakly, then sobered. Evelyn, he said, I'm sorry for what my board put you through, for doubting you, for letting someone like Hale get this close. I walked him in the door too, I said. Don't put all of it on yourself. The man's made a career out of slithering into cracks people don't even know they have. Still, he said, you came in here as a waitress, and you're walking out as a problem, probably, I said. For the right people anyway. There was a knock. Amelia stepped inside, closed the door behind her. I've just gotten off the phone with outside counsel, she said. We will, of course, fully cooperate with the investigation. They're drafting a statement to that effect. Good, I said. That'll go over well when the press eventually finds out a major private equity firm is under federal investigation for treating companies like chess pieces. She tilted her head. You seem awfully calm for someone who just helped orchestrate a corporate decapitation, she said. I'm tired, I said. Being angry takes energy. I've done enough of that the last 2 years. Amelia considered me. The board will need to appoint an interim chair, she said. With Mr. Hale. Indisposed. She said, indisposed, like someone might say in a shallow grave. She turned to Graham. I'll be nominating myself, she said. Unless you object. I'd be relieved, he said. Good answer, she replied. She faced me again. And you, Miss Harper, she said. If we don't get sued into oblivion for this, and we manage to emerge intact, it's going to be, in large part, because of you. I had help, I said. Federal, mostly. Nevertheless, she said, I hope you'll consider staying on as an advisor to the board, not just to Graham. Your particular way of looking at risk might be exactly what we need. I blinked. You want to pay me to keep insulting your decisions? I asked. Yes, she said, but this time, we'll call it governance. I smiled, unexpectedly moved. Think about it, she said. I'll have legal send you a draft. After they're done hyperventilating, she left as quietly as she'd come. Graham exhaled. Evelyn, he said, what do you want out of all this? I mean, beyond revenge. I thought about it. A decent night's sleep, I said. A modest office with a view that doesn't overlook a dumpster. Some form of justice for my clients. A reduced sentence for my idiot son if he keeps cooperating. And maybe, I hesitated, maybe a chance to be known for something other than the worst thing that ever happened to me. He nodded slowly. I think we can arrange some of that, he said. And the rest? I asked. He smiled faintly. The rest, he said, you'll probably arrange yourself. Justice moves slowly, but gossip moves fast. Within a week, the financial press was buzzing. Hale Capital Partners founder arrested on federal charges. Commentators speculated. Former employees called in to say they had concerns all along, now that it was safe to do so. My name showed up in some of the deeper pieces. Former advisor involved in exposing pattern, key witness, industry veteran turned whistleblower. The first time I saw Evelyn Harper in a headline without the word scandal attached, I sat down and cried. Then I made myself a cup of tea and got back to work. Josh called from prison a month later. Mom, he said, I heard about Hale. News travels, I said. Even in Orange, Agent Mendoza came to see me, he said. She said my early statements helped. They're filing something with the court. Said I might be eligible for a sentence reduction if I testify. That's good, I said. Silence crackled for a second. Did you hear the tapes? He asked. Of what he said? About you. Yes, I said. I heard him call my firm a pilot program. I heard him call you a test. He swallowed audibly. I'm so sorry, he said again, like the words might eventually fill the hole he'd blown through both our lives. I know, I said. And now you're trying to do something useful with your guilt. That's more than some people manage. You're not, he started, then stopped. You're not doing all this just to fix my sentence, are you? I laughed softly. Oh no, I said. Sweetheart, you're a chapter in this book, not the whole story. I'm doing this because men like Hale think they can use people like us and then forget our names. I'm not forgettable, and neither, unfortunately for you, are you. He snorted. I miss you, he said. I miss the version of you who didn't think crime was an acceptable business strategy, I said. Maybe we'll get him back. Stranger things have happened. Another pause. Do you still hate me? He asked quietly. Some days, I said honestly. Other days, I'm just tired. Most days, I'm busy. Hate takes time. Time I'd rather spend making sure people like Hale don't have more sons like you to recruit. He let out a breath that sounded half like a sob. I'll keep working with them, he said. Tell them everything. I know you will, I said. Try not to get shanked in the process. Mom, he said, horrified. It's not like TV. Good, I said. You always were too soft for gangs. We hung up with an awkward, hopeful kind of quiet between us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. You'd think that after helping expose a multi-million-dollar corporate predator, I'd quit Rusty's roadside diner and never look back. You'd be wrong. A few months later, on a Tuesday morning, I was back behind the counter, pouring coffee for truckers and college kids, my Harper Strategic blazer hanging on a hook in the back. Rusty leaned against the pass-through, arms crossed, watching me. You know you don't have to keep doing this, he said. What with your fancy new clients and your FBI fan club? I know, I said. But where else am I going to get this kind of entertainment? Boardrooms don't ask for extra syrup, he snorted. How's the other gig? He asked. You still yelling at rich people? Politely, I said. I bill by the hour now when I do it, which makes it more satisfying. Harper Strategic had a new office, a modest space on the 12th floor of a building downtown with a view of the mountains and no bullet holes in the drywall. My client list was small but serious. Firms who'd looked at the Hale news and thought, maybe we should find a woman who survived this kind of thing and ask her how. I picked my clients carefully. No ego drunk boys trying to turn their mom's trust fund into a crypto empire. No founders who used disruption as a synonym for fraud. I specialized officially in turnarounds and risk culture. Unofficially, I specialized in telling CEOs, no, that's stupid, before they signed something that would end up as Exhibit B. Lockwood survived, more than survived. Under Amelia's unflinching eye and Graham's newly humbled leadership, they quietly sold off the rest of their vanity projects and doubled down on the boring stuff that actually made money. Within a year, they were out of triage and into slow, sane growth. They offered me a permanent board advisory seat. I took it on the condition that I still got to work in my own office, on my own terms. Can you believe it? I asked Rusty, topping off a mug. I'm 70 and on a corporate board. Should have put money on that 10 years ago. I would have, he said. You're too stubborn to retire. He wasn't wrong. A news segment about Hale's case played, muted, on the small TV over the counter. He'd taken a deal in the end. Facing a mountain of taped conversations, emails, and cooperating witnesses my son included, he'd pled to a selection of charges, enough to land him in federal prison for, the rest of the useful part of his life. Colton flipped first. Of course he did. Boys like that rarely stand up under real pressure. He sang like a canary. The recordings, combined with the business patterns, painted the ugly picture the FBI needed. Harper and Cole's clients, those still alive and kicking, received restitution checks from a court-administered fund established from Hale's seized assets. It didn't erase what they'd been through, but it patched some holes. Agent Mendoza sent me a copy of the sentencing memo. They'd included a section explicitly describing Hale's pilot program at my firm. The judge had not been amused. Also included a recommendation for a sentence reduction for Josh, currently under review. I kept that memo in my desk drawer, next to my insulin, and a photo of him at 8, gap-toothed and grinning with a soccer ball under his arm. A trucker at the counter squinted at the TV. "Didn't you have something to do with that guy going down?" he asked me. "A little," I said. He shook his head. "Damn," he said. "Remind me to tip well. Don't want to end up audited." I smiled. "Good instincts," I said. "I do my best work when properly caffeinated. You've probably figured out by now that I'm telling you this story in front of a camera." That came later. One of my younger clients, a tech founder who wore hoodies that cost more than my first car, invited me to speak on a panel about ethics in finance and tech. Just what I always wanted, I thought, to be the morality mascot. But I went. And afterwards, someone from a podcast asked to interview me, then a financial literacy channel, then a journalist who'd once written a smug piece about my fall from grace emailed an embarrassingly apologetic request for a follow-up. I said yes to some of them, not because I like attention, but because if my mess could keep one more young analyst from listening to the next Colton with a gleam in his eye, it was worth rehashing. Eventually, a friend's granddaughter said, "You should tell this story on YouTube. People would actually watch. You're like if Wall Street had a cranky fairy godmother." So here I am, sitting in my modest office, camera propped up on a stack of finance textbooks, telling you how a broke waitress walked back into the world that spat her out and set a trap for the man who thought she was finished. If you're watching this, I say into the lens, go ahead and subscribe or whatever it is you kids do. Tell me where you're watching from. I like knowing which time zones my trouble travels to, because that's the point really. Not the justice, not even the revenge, satisfying as it is. It's the example. Somewhere out there is a woman my age, or older, sitting in a tiny apartment, staring at a bank balance she doesn't understand and feeling like it's too late to do anything meaningful with the time she's got left. Somewhere out there is a mother whose kid has broken her heart so thoroughly she's not sure there's anything left to put back together. Somewhere out there is a waitress being humiliated by a man who thinks service means beneath him, and I want her to see me wrinkled, tired, still working double shifts and know this. You are not done. You are not ornamental. You are not optional. You are a problem, for the right people, if you decide to be. A year after Hale's arrest, I got a letter. Real paper, real envelope. My name written in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a short note. "Miss Harper, I was on the junior team at Baird and Lanning when everything went down there. I recognize now the pattern you've been talking about. I thought I was just unlucky. I realize now we were targeted. I wanted you to know that hearing your story, it helped. I'm starting over. Smaller firm, better values. I'm paying attention now. Thank you for ruining the right man's life. S." I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I stuck it on my wall, right next to a photo of Rusty pretending not to smile and a screenshot of the conviction headline. Later that week, I walked into Lockwood for a quarterly board meeting. As I passed the reception desk, the young woman behind it smiled. "Miss Harper," she said. "We love your channel, by the way. My mom watches every episode. She says you're her patron saint of not taking crap." I laughed so hard I nearly missed the elevator. Upstairs in the boardroom, I took my usual seat. Amelia ran the meeting with surgical efficiency. Graham presented numbers, boring, healthy, stable numbers. When it was my turn, I didn't talk much. Just pointed out a couple of overexcited proposals, flagged a risk here, a don't be an idiot there. At the end, as people were packing up, Amelia turned to me. "Evelyn," she said. "Off the record." "Yes, do you regret it?" she asked. "Coming back, I mean. After what happened with your son, the raid, all of it. You could have stayed at the diner, licked your wounds in peace." "No," I said, without hesitation. I regret not noticing sooner. I regret not protecting my clients better. I regret not teaching my son to be a man who turned down the Coltons of the world. I shrugged. But coming back, I said, no, I'm better at this than I am at Sudoku. It would have been a waste. She smiled. I'm glad you did, she said. The world doesn't need more meek people. Good, I said. Because I aged out of meek decades ago. So that's the story. I lost everything. I wiped down sticky tables in a roadside diner while people on TV dissected my reputation. I watched my son go to prison. I watched men with perfectly tailored suits and dead eyes circle my ruins and call it capitalism. And then I put on a cheap blazer, walked back into their world, and helped drag the biggest vulture I could find into the light. Not because I'm noble. I'm not. I'm petty. I enjoy watching bad men realize they underestimated the wrong grandma. But also because I know how easy it is to give up once you've been knocked flat. To believe the worst thing that happened to you is the last interesting thing about you. It isn't. If you're watching this from a bed where you've been lying awake doing math you don't like, if you're watching this from a night shift, or a kitchen table covered in bills, or a car parked outside a place you don't want to walk into, if you're watching this and thinking, I'm too old to start over, listen to me. I was 70, broke, diabetic, working in a diner that smelled like burned bacon and despair, when a man in a $10,000 suit told me my entire life was worth less than his phone call. 2 days later, he was knocking on my door asking for help. A year later, I watched the man who used my son as a test case shuffle into a courtroom in handcuffs. Another year later, I'm here, still working, still consulting, still yelling at fools with money, still taking the occasional shift at Rusty's because it keeps me honest and because I like having a front row seat to human nature. So no, you're not done. You may be bruised, broke, betrayed. You may be the punchline in other people's stories, but you're still here. You can still move a piece on the board. You can still look someone in the eye and say, I think I'm done here, and walk out of a room that was designed to make you feel small. And if the men who engineered your downfall ever forget that, well, they should remember what happened to the last one who underestimated a waitress named Evelyn Harper. He thought he was calling checkmate. He was wrong. I was, and still am, the one holding the king.